Good day to you and welcome to Shalom Radio UK. I'm going audio and video, not just my voice but also my pretty face, if you think it's pretty. Please don't post any comments. It might be embarrassing for you or for me. I'm having a great time at the moment. I've got a friend visiting me and his name is... I'll let him introduce himself to you.
I'm Dr. Max de Bono de Laurentiis from Scotland. I live just outside Edinburgh. And I'm down here with my good friend Roni, helping him work on a few bits of material.
We've been looking at how one might produce one's own books. And Max has been a tremendous help and support to me. I'm busy trying to craft a couple of books, and we're having some good success. Max, won't you tell our viewers something about how you have gone about writing your books? And maybe mention one or two of your books.
How have I gone about writing them? Well, the easiest way for me, I find, is to type.
Yes, look. Can I? Is it possible?
Rephrase.
Is it possible to be serious? Seriously speaking, we've got to use these English words. Mention some of the titles of some of your books.
What I suppose one of the more famous ones, if you like, is how did Paul, or Rabbi Shaul, how did Paul preach the gospel to the Gentiles without the New Testament? Which is something most Gentiles don't think about, because when Paul was preaching the gospel, they didn't have a New Testament. It hadn't even been written yet. And Yeshua, Jesus himself, said, this gospel, preach this gospel, a particular gospel. So are we looking at the writings of Paul, which were letters given to the Jewish believer and Gentile believers, as something they're not? Now remember, when the letters that Paul, Peter and the others wrote to the fellowships, they didn't receive the letter and go, oh, Old Testament's forgotten now, we can forget the Old Testament, we have the New Testament here with this letter. That would never have happened. So I explain that a bit in my book.
Well, if I think about what was the gospel that the disciples of Yeshua preached, and Yeshua himself, it was the gospel according to Yeshayahu, and the gospel according to Zechariah, and the gospel according to Hosea.
That's right.
It was the Hebrew scriptures. It was the Torah that they preached and proclaimed. We forget that. And one of the difficulties that we are encountering in our modern world is the fact that Torah has been lost. The Torah is, of course, it's much more than just the 5 books of Moses. It's the teachings. And it's the teaching that Yeshua, HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, used. And he said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. We think, and many people say, that the Hebrew scriptures or the Old Testament has been abolished.
No. It's very interesting, actually, because the New Testament has been translated as law. And when you read the word law, you instantly think legalism, that doesn't apply. But when you understand that the word law is actually a translation of the word from the Hebrew, Torah, which means the teachings of God, you get a different perspective. Because to say the Torah is all laws, you haven't read it. It's history, it's poetry, it's prophecy, it's everything. And yes, it does contain some laws. But there's a whole lot of reasons why it's not just law. Now, it's the teachings of God. Now, right the way through biblical history, since God, actually, Yeshua gave the Torah to Moshe on Mount Sinai, all right? The Torah has been known in the scriptures as the way, the truth, and the life. Now, Yeshua himself, Jesus, is the Word made flesh. The Word is the Torah. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the Torah made flesh. So, of course, he lived the Torah completely. Now, he didn't have to go and give sacrifices for sin because he was sinless. Okay, but what he was showing us with the Torah and how we are to live it is to obey the righteous lifestyle that he gave us in it to live. Now, go on.
One of the things that has impressed itself upon me, I think it's in John chapter 2, the law was given through Moshe and grace and truth through Yeshua HaMashiach. And people use those two parts of the verse against each other. And many people say that, yes, there you are. When Jesus came along, he abolished the law of Moses, and now it's all grace and truth. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when you look around yourself, many believers live a lifestyle which actually cries out in the face of the Torah. Mm-hmm. It's completely without law. Exactly. They think that now they've got license to do anything.
That's right.
And this is called antinomianism without law.
That's right.
People misunderstand that. And it's not a question that Yeshua, Jesus, nullified the law. He came as the completion, the goal, and the fulfillment.
How it was to be lived. He came to show how it was to be lived. Now, there's a very common misconception. When Jesus said, "I have not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it," that to fulfill it means to complete, to finish, it's ended, it's over and done with. Actually, if you understand about anything about Judaism and rabbinic speech, that is what's the word I'm looking for? It's I hate when that happens. My mind's gone blank. It's a form of speech. Okay, when one rabbi would argue with another, he would say, "You are destroying the law," which means you are misinterpreting it and you are teaching it wrong. But if the rabbi says, "Nah, I am fulfilling the law," what it means is he has come and he's teaching it correctly. It's an idiom. That's the word I was looking for.
Not an idiot.
Not an idiot. That's me. An idiom.
No. I wouldn't want to suggest to anyone that you're an idiot. You're a very, very intelligent, well-educated man.
So what it is he came to fulfill the Torah, which means to teach it correctly. Because what was happening was the rabbis at the time were putting their oral traditions ahead of the written Torah. And that's what Yeshua, that's what Paul or Rabbi Shaul were against with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because they put the traditions of their own teachings, which were too much of a burden for the people to bear, because they were constantly putting more and more laws on, instead of studying the Torah, which is light, and his yoke is easy to bear. Okay?
I love that scripture.
And it's actually talking about the written Torah.
I love that scripture that says, "My yoke is easy, my burden is light." And of course, that is a metaphor and a picture for us of a yoke of oxen pulling a heavy load. Now, if you are to pull the load of life on your own, it's a heavy burden. Mm-hmm. But Yeshua invites us to be yoked together with him. Mm-hmm. And we, as we are yoked together, are able to walk with a lighter load. And he is the burden bearer and the burden carrier. It's so exciting to be alive in this day and age as Messianic believers, Jews and Gentiles who love Yeshua HaMashiach, and we are the heralds of his coming. According to some sections of the Christian church, we have just entered the season of Advent. And although I personally believe Yeshua was probably born round about Tabernacles, September, October, Sukkot, he, however, is celebrated in the Christian church as being born in December. I don't want to go down that chute because that's a whole discussion on its own. But sufficient to say, the anticipation, Advent means the coming or anticipation of the coming of the Lord, and he indeed came first as a babe born in Bethlehem, in the house of bread, in Bethlehem, but he is coming again as our judge and our king. And he is the most wonderful person. He is Yeshua HaMashiach. And dear viewers, it's a great pleasure to speak to you. And so Max and I together say, Shalom.